So, today I want to talk about the dark side, the shadow archetype, and the myth of Medusa. Welcome to Real Life and Archetypes. My name is Marina. So, this is quite an interesting subject, and there's a lot of point of views to address the shadow archetype. But let me just try and, wing it because this is quite complicated. But the reason why I made this video was because the other day I was prompted because of a conversation I had with a relative to write him a letter and to give him some more details about dark stuff that have happened to me in my life. And his reaction was of shock. And it reminded me of Medusa. I was thinking, he's turned into stone, he's like frozen. It gave me the impression from what he was saying and referring to other stuff that he was watching on the news about, really terrible things that some people do. And I just thought of the Greek myth of Medusa because Medusa represents this state of being frozen by looking at something that is really horrible. So let me just show you what Medusa looked like. So this is, look at this. So this is, I'm going to just explain the myth very briefly. But what happened was that Medusa was actually a woman who was very attractive and had beautiful hair. The issue is that she attracted the attention of an Olympian god, Poseidon, and he took advantage of her. I'm trying to be delicate with the language here on YouTube. He took advantage of her in the temple of Athena, who was another Olympian god. Now, the relationship between Poseidon and Athena, these two gods, was of a great rivalry for the city of Athens and other stuff. It was complicated, let's say. And so the problem is that Athena was the one who punished Medusa and turned her into a monster. And apparently, the issue was the desecration of her sacred temple, which is where Poseidon had done the deed to Medusa. So, again, Poseidon was not punished, the victim was. Another great example of how things happen. But Athena turned Medusa into this monstrous creature, a gorgon with snakes in the hair instead of hair that was snakes, and a face so ugly and a gaze that was so particular that it turned anyone who looked at her into stone. It petrified them. So this is, a great way to represent this freezing or being paralyzed by fear of something that you're looking at, or you're becoming more conscious of things that are very scary. This is very much of the shadow archetype. Shadow archetype is Scorpio in the zodiac. Again, I repeat the same thing every time. We all have at least a little bit of all of the archetypes. So if you think just about the sun in Scorpio, people who have the sun, no, we all have to deal with that side of the human experience. So there is darkness, there is misuse of power. Now, the concept of being frozen, from the perspective of the situation that I was referring to at the beginning and why I created this video, was of somebody who is not used to having to look at this aspect of the human experience, and who actually even rejects it, doesn't want to go into it. It's like too much, and now he's having to look at it, and it's something that is going to take a while for him to digest. Sorry about that, but that's reality. Imagine experiencing it yourself. So the issue of freezing, which is from the perspective of a victim, victims will understand this, but you have to understand that the issue of the shadow and misuse of power is something that we all have to look at. And that even when we look at some people who are really monstrous, okay, because they misuse their power, they use domination, control, all sort, they can be evil. They can express their powers in very negative way. The function of having to look at these things in life is because of something so difficult for most people to actually accept, that they're going to do something else that I will explain in a moment. There is in all of us the capacity to use our power negatively. The function of dealing with power dynamics where others are going to be felt as having more power than we do. One of the functions, it's a big archetype, but one of the functions is that it's going to force the way that we use the dark side that we have and how we can use our power negatively. And we all do it. The issue that we usually have in order to avoid to look at the dark side, and if you avoid looking it outside of you, you're avoiding it to look at it inside of yourself. If you just focus on what is negative outside or you can't deal with it, you're not going to be able to address the darkness in you. As a human being, we all have dark expression of ourselves, and it's going to make us be not very nice people to some. And again, there's a spectrum. But you can think of many situations when you say something nasty to somebody, or you don't say something encouraging and positive to somebody, and you don't praise them or you don't support them. You fail to take any action that can have, a negative result for someone else. But we all do things that are not at least very nice, okay? So I get very triggered when I hear people who say, well, I'm a very good person and I have all the best intentions. Well, that's a big lie, because we are all capable of hurting others and we do it in many ways. So what happens? So we're looking at, one side of the shadow archetype, because there are many things. So let's say that we are this kind of person. I'm a good person, good intentions. What we're going to do is to focus on a bigger enemy. And this is psychologically a thing that we all do. We create enemies. But one of the problems of this is that as long as we see something really bad, like really very bad people, we could be using that as a way to distract from the need to look at what is dark inside ourselves. And I assure you, if you refuse to look at the dark side of yourself, you will be expressing that power negatively. And instead of seeing it in yourself, you're going to create enemies. Okay? You're going to, let me just put this, I have a few images. Yeah, this quote that I want to show you. The enemies is constructed from denied aspects of the self. So this is a little complicated to explain, because what an enemy represents is having something that we don't have that we actually want to have. Now you're going to say, but I don't want to be that evil person. No, but the person who you perceive as having more power or more will than you, okay, and more results than you because they exercise a power, and you're going to choose deliberately to have really bad kinds of people so that you avoid to look at not only the negative stuff that you actually express and how you use your own power, but actually the real function of this archetype, which is for you to dig deep inside into your own limitations at not having some traits that you would like to have, which you know are very powerful. And when you can't have that, you're going to create this image of an enemy in other people so that you don't have to address the fact that you have to grow and evolve and then make that decision, which we all have to make, whether we want to express certain aspects of ourselves positively or negatively. We all have to make this decision. And this relates directly to the hero. The hero has a fundamental role, or it's an energy that we all have that is at the origin of everything that we do and who we are. This is where we need to discover really who we want to be, and the idea that we all have a potential to fulfill. And when we refuse the call to go into this adventure of life and deciding, what it is that we want to do, how motivated we are, if we don't know how to use our powerful energy, which is because it's very powerful and big, and we don't become aware of that, we're going to use it negatively on others. So that's why it always relates back to the hero. If the hero is going to choose and to have the courage to set the tone for everything else in life and to decide to lead life, to direct their intentions and their desires about becoming who they want to be towards something that is really motivating, it's going to be positive for them. They're going to become a kind of person that is going to bring something uplifting into the world, that they're going to have an energy that is going to be positive. Now, when we don't address the needs for fulfillment of the hero, which most people don't, we usually don't think in terms of, you know what, I actually want to do something that I love. This is what the hero wants. The hero wants to do what it wants, and then it evolves and is thinking, I want to do what I love. So now this energy of love, and it's about loving life, it's about loving what you're doing at any given moment, and it gives you a motivation. And because of that energy that you have, your presence in the world is going to bring something positive and uplifting. So lacking self-awareness of the energy of the hero can have big consequences, much bigger than we may imagine, because we can turn into a kind of person who either doesn't do anything particular, which by the way relates to another video that where I talked about the Divine Comedy, where they speak of the souls that are not even part of hell, they are on the outskirts of hell, and they did nothing in with their lives, nothing positive or negative, which was like the worst thing ever. It was even worse than having done other things. So the hero needs to have a motivation and to decide and define the life that you want and who you want to be. And then you need to address the realities of the world. But the first original intention is that, because this is where you're going to decide who you're going to be. And incorporating the idea of how are you going to use and express your power is so important that at one stage of the hero's journey, we have to deal with the shadow archetype. And we're going to encounter enemies in our lives, and they represent something that we actually want to have. What happens a lot with this shadow archetype and the Scorpio energy is that it's going to bring temptation into our lives. Okay? It's going to bring the desire to be very close to people who have something that we don't have and that we want. So, usually at the most basic level, it's always about resources, money, and things like that. But it's also about other things, actually. It's always deeper. And the way that we need to address this archetype is really about a transformation, the destruction of a part of us that is very limited because we become more emotionally dependent on others that we need to be very close with and intimate with. This is a behavior and desires that are sexualized, and we get close to others, they have what we want. But the function of having those experiences is that we're going to absorb traits that others have and that others have. And they also, in a positive way, we need to develop an appreciation for what others have and their traits. But part of this experience is to look at negative examples. That is the function of looking at the dark side of life or even having difficult experiences. in the dark side. In the end, the ultimate result of that is that you're going to have an example of, you know, are you going to be that? Because if you don't realize this truth, I assure you, you're going to use your power negatively, and it's going to be exactly what you hate in others. But the person that you hate, you're going to choose the worst and the biggest kind of example in the spectrum of evil, so that you never want to think that it has anything to do with you and this, these repressed desires for something that this person represents as having. This concept is, it's very complicated. Excuse me, I want to mention something. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist. He studied mythology from around the world and wanted to look for the things that were universal about the storytellings, the stories that were told around the world. And he's the one that came up with the concept of the hero's journey. He once spoke of rituals of initiation that took, for example, boys in some tribes away from their mothers. The mothers would perform dramatically, the pain of separation. But the whole point was to take the boys to a ritual cave, to the darkness, so that they would perform ceremonies that are very scary, and so that the boys would come out of it completely transformed and with a consciousness of being transformed. Now, what Joseph Campbell mentioned once that I found very interesting is about, look at this. This is one of those caves where they would take boys. Where is that? This is in Bali. This is the Elephant Cave. Menacing entrance carved in the shape of a demon's mouth with patterns in, it looks almost like Medusa, like hair, patterns of animals, demons, and deities. Here's the thing. The process of transformation, which is what is supposed to happen when we look at the dark side, the transformation not only of acknowledging the dark things that you have inside of yourself, but the need to recognize that they have been tainted by. Usually, it comes from generations. There's something about those qualities that you see in other people as negative. You create the enemy because they have a power that you don't have. And you need to gain that power and use these negative examples of the enemies to have a reference that, okay, you don't want to be that. You want to be that powerful person, but in a positive way. But when you're not ready to do that because you just want to stay at the stage of having an enemy, what you're doing is standing at the entrance of something like this cave. The entrance was created purposefully to represent the idea that we're not going to go into this process of transformation, okay, willfully. Usually something will happen in life that is going to force us to evolve and to go to new stages of growth in ourselves and to incorporate to use new capabilities. And look at this. Imagine going at the entrance of such a place in darkness at night. Most people would not go in. However, those who go into the process of transformation, what it represents is that now you're going to enter the cave. And some people are ready and some people are not. So being frozen by the darkness and the dark side, this is all the same kind of stuff. This cave is just like looking at Medusa. Because what we need and why it's necessary to look at the dark side of life, it's because it has a function, because we all misuse our power in many ways. But we're going to create a huge enemy just so that we don't have to go into the cave and do this very deep psychological work of transforming ourselves. It's much easier to just have snakes in the head, be a negative person, okay, and just focus on other others who are always to blame, right? They're the enemy, just to avoid changing and developing a side of us that is not developed, because that change that we need to make is actually scary, because it's going to introduce something new in our lives. And that new thing, okay, that new part of us, that new self, represents destroying an old self. This is why this is associated with death and being scared, because a part of us needs to die. It's actually about growth. It's all about growth. We all grow up, okay? So we're not the same person we were when we were 2 years old. But here we're talking about something much deeper, that there is something that we want. And if we do the process of evolution and going deep into the darker aspects of ourselves, and the need to control others or to manipulate or to create an enemy, all come from the need to express some power, to have power, and that we may be frustrated because we don't have it, or we're using it negatively in big ways or in small ways. If we don't look at that and don't go through this transformation and leave behind a part of ourselves that is either limited, doesn't have power, or is using power negatively, then we're not going to have access again to a bigger experience of life. I always explain this concept. This is so important to understand. If we refuse a lot of the challenges that we go through in life, and going through those experiences and growing up and evolving, the problem is that we're going to remain stuck. We're going to stay smaller. This is directly linked to an archetype where that indicates that we have to develop, which is the family archetype. There's a part of us that needs to grow and be developed. This is something that comes from, that started to grow when we were smaller. Okay, this is a whole other aspect of archetypes. But this shadow archetype is related to that because it's an emotional thing, it's a psychological thing. It's about the things that we feel very intensely because we want to grow more. We want to have more of something that we don't have. We suddenly feel a sense of lack that is so deep that it's going to get us either closer to people with the wrong references, and those will become the enemies that you create, by the way. But the thing is that you have to look at yourself and realize the things that you need to develop and become a more empowered, and then make that huge decision. Are you going to be tempted to use your power negatively, or are you going to use it positively? So it's important to try to understand this thing. I wanted to show another thing. Look at this. So this is a representation of how to decide to use your power. This is Perseus. Can't remember who he is in mythology. There are so many characters. But he was the one who eliminated Medusa, and he decapitated her. And look at him holding the head. And you know how he used that? He used it as a weapon. He captured her and took her head because he wanted to use the head to scare people. Because again, the power of this head was that it turned people into stone. So he used it as a powerful weapon. Again, something ugly, the misuse of our power, and the desire, the very dark desires that we have, the temptations that we all have that. Oh, if I could prove to people this and that, and if I had that. And there's a quote by Lincoln that I love, Abraham Lincoln. I don't have it here to print it on the screen, but he said something along the lines of anybody can overcome challenges, very difficult challenges in life, but give a man power, and then you're going to see what that person is really made of. So that's why our relationship with power and power dynamics is so important, and to have an understanding of our own desires and respond to the need to evolve, because refusing or being, turned to stone and refusing to look at the dark things that happen in the world, or being stuck and having the snakes in the head because you're just in, constructing an enemy, and just it has to be something very intense, by the way, because we can, think about others as really bad and consider them enemies, but I'm talking about an obsession. This is part of this our archetype. It's very obsessive, and it's a way to say, okay, let me just call other people really bad so I don't have to look at the way that I am dark. And I assure you that we all have a dark side. So, I think I've got pretty much everything that I wanted to say. I mean, there is so much more, but the whole point is that we need to transform that darkness into light. So we all have to deal with the dark side. It doesn't mean that you have to be looking at really horrible things all the time, but to refuse, which is, what originated this video, to have this difficulty at looking at the reality of life, because this is the real world. Evil exists, darkness exists. And the whole point is that we understand that there is something inside of us that we could be using more positively. And this whole psychological process of digging deep and trying to figure that out is not easy to go through, because, it's difficult to admit that there are a lot of things that you do, that you have flaws, that you hurt others, maybe in ways, again, that you don't intend, but you still do it. And then there's this whole other spectrum of people who are actually very consciously using their powers in negative form. I mean, I'm thinking now, there's in the news, Diddy has been arrested. This is a monster. There's no, thing. That kind of person is not going to change. This is just evil. So you look at that. I mean, when you look into what this guy is involved in, and I've been looking into that stuff for quite a while, because a lot of people have been speaking for many years. You're looking at darkness. I'm capable of looking at things like that. I've been through it. So, but some people, they refuse to look at things like that. And the problem is that a lot of people are being victimized. And because others are not able to deal and handle that this is part of life, people are being even more victimized. So you become an enabler when you want to avoid that kind of stuff. And I don't mean that you have to be, looking, at things that you can't stand. It's not about that. Some of us are more capable of facing those things and looking at them, and maybe having an impact in helping others because we've been through it. But to completely reject it because you don't want that thing in your head and you think that you want to have peace in your life, the problem is that you're enabling a lot of very difficult things to happen to others because you're not available. So, it's important to deal with the dark side inside of us, outside of us, for so many reasons. This is such a huge archetype, the shadow. It's so difficult for me to explain, because it has so many experiences in real life that relate to this archetype. But if you recognize, your first of all, the desire to be very close to someone who represents power to you, this is typical. I mean, this happens to us all the time. People idolize celebrities and they would do anything to get closer to these people, or people in positions of authority and, what's the word, power. Yeah, because we all are going to have to deal with the power dynamics, and especially the way that we decide to do it. So I'm just going to leave it there. What a complicated subject, but I will refer to The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers. There's a playlist on YouTube that you can check out. If you don't know Joseph Campbell, for the love of God, go and check him out because it's he left a legacy that is just incredible. So I'm just going to say goodbye for now, and I will see you next time, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and support this channel.